is 1793. The French Revolution has collapsed into chaos, and one of France's greatest musicians is jailed. The son of a slave, Le Chevalier de Saint-Georges rose to become one of France's most popular heroes. But here in prison, the legacy of a man who has been called Le Mozart Noir will be lost to history. Saint-Georges is a man of remarkable achievements. Europe's greatest fencer, a renowned violinist, and a composer who influenced Mozart. Tragically, his music will not be heard for another 200 years.
He, as a character, is a mystifying, alluring, just a bigger-than-life kind of human being. I mean, most people are astonished when I tell them there's a composer who happens to be black during the time of Mozart. People are surprised. That can't possibly be.
There's no doubt about it that the Parisian public adored him at the time. He was exotic. He was one of the best violinists they had, and he turned Paris into the Mecca of symphony.
I'm interested in Saint-Georges, and I'm discovering that other musicians in other parts of the world are interested in Saint-Georges at the same moment. Something is happening astrologically, or I don't know what it is, that can account for that, but there's a certain style in the air, there's a certain spirit, musical spirit in the air.
Saint-Georges awaits his calling to the guillotine. Such a momentous death would befit the epic life that this remarkable outsider has lived. The story of classical music's first black composer begins a continent away. Saint-Georges was born in Guadeloupe on Christmas Day, 1745, to a rich colonialist and his slave mistress. The Bellon family fortune is founded on sugar, coffee, and the labor of African slaves. Saint-Georges' prospects in Guadeloupe are meager because the law prevents mulattoes from owning land. So the father, a minor aristocrat, makes a bold decision to take his slave mistress and mulatto son to Paris in hopes of turning him into a French gentleman.
The relationship between Saint-Georges' father and him, there was just a real attachment between him and his son. He may have just found it impossible not to take him with him. He may have just adored him.
The main gist, I think, the main thrust of the father's ambition for the boy was to see whether he could get him into society.
Young Saint-Georges arrives in Paris as the age of enlightenment is dawning. His father hopes to offer his son a freer life in an international cultural capital. However, these aspirations face the prevailing attitudes in France, which see blacks as servants and laborers. The most contemptuous attitudes see blacks as animals without souls, in a time when the slave trade is still rampant and lucrative.
Being somehow between two worlds, one of which is in the lowest social strata, slaves, and the other one in the higher social strata, the aristocrats, this must have made him very insecure.
Fencing is the sport of the aristocracy and a ticket into society. Saint-Georges is enrolled by his father in Lavoisier's prestigious Academy of Fencing at 13 years old. Young Saint-Georges seizes the opportunity to prove himself. A disciplined and model student, he devotes countless hours to training, developing his talent to an extent that dazzles everyone, including Lavoisier's son, who writes, "At the head of all my father's students must be placed the inimitable Saint-Georges. At 15, he was beating the strongest fighters. At 17, he acquired the greatest speed. He astonished with his agility, and he never hurt anyone." But Saint-Georges' reputation as a great fencer raises the ire of many whites, and he receives challenges from across Europe.
Actually, we have a kind of a proof of his father's ambition for him and how he pushed him. And that is the incident when another fencing master by the name of Picard started sending messages to Paris saying that he wanted to fight Boissier's mulatto, which was pejoratively used by him at the time.
Hurt by Picard's racial condescension, Saint-Georges is unwilling to accept such an ignoble challenge. But his father persuades him that every fight is a chance to prove his worth and preserve his honor. Saint-Georges defeats Picard, but mindful of challenges to come, he returns with renewed focus to the hours of solitary training. To further Saint-Georges' aristocratic education, his father employs the great composers of Paris, Gossec, Leclerc, and Lully, to teach his son to play the violin. With this turn to music, Saint-Georges discovers his calling. He devotes himself completely to mastering the violin.
His technique was extraordinary, almost as if the virtuoso fencer transferred his right-hand technique with the sword to the bow.
Each year, Saint-Georges' teacher Gossec organizes special concerts featuring the best musicians from across France, united in one orchestra called Les Concerts des Amateurs. He invites Saint-Georges to play first violin. It is a daring choice. Saint-Georges is an anomaly in the white world of high society concert music, but he is not intimidated, and his performances are virtuosic. The young violinist is rewarded with an enthusiastic reception from Parisian audiences.
I really believe that him being a mulatto in a white society made him work harder towards being recognized.
Saint-Georges quickly masters the contemporary repertoire. Inspired, he turns to composition as a new way to challenge himself. He becomes passionate about discovering the limits of the violin and how far they can be pushed.
The way that he wrote his music is so indicative of somebody who's like, I gotta be number one, I gotta be up there.
His writing is very virtuosic. It's clear that he could get around the instrument very easily and had no technical limitations whatsoever in any regard.
Saint-Georges' virtuosic experiments on the violin lead him to discover the instrument's potential to spar against the orchestra in new, more aggressive ways. The result is a dynamic new form of music, the symphonie concertante, which is legendarily challenging for performers.
When you play the concertos of Saint-Georges, you're not going to have a walk in the park. You're going to sweat a little bit.
Even in some modern repertoire, I've never played quite as high on the fingerboard. I mean, what is it? I mean, I'm way up there. He keeps shooting you up there and then immediately back down. So I had to figure out how to do that.
Oftentimes your hands will be, like this, or you'll be asked to do all these different things and come up with all sorts of interesting bowing. This is exciting for the audience. It's exciting for me.
There was like about 4 measures that were just going to break me, or every night I kind of went like, oh my God, am I going to get it tonight?